Good evening, and welcome to Twilight Dance. Tonight's story explores one of the most powerful and enduring creatures ever imagined: dragons. Beings that appear across cultures, often described as ancient, mysterious, and deeply connected to the world itself. So settle in, relax, and let the story carry you into a quiet and restful night.
Good evening, and welcome. Tonight we explore one of the oldest and most powerful creatures ever imagined, dragons. Long before they appeared in modern stories, dragons existed in the earliest myths of human civilization. Across distant lands and different cultures, people described powerful beings with long bodies, great wings, and a presence that felt ancient and deeply connected to the world. These descriptions were not always identical, but they carried the same sense of awe, as though something vast had once moved through the skies or beneath the earth. In many early traditions, dragons were not simply creatures, but forces of nature. They were tied to storms, rivers, mountains, and the balance of the world itself. Some were believed to control rain and water, while others were associated with fire and destruction. This connection to nature made them feel real in a way that went beyond imagination, as if they were part of the world rather than separate from it. What makes these stories remarkable is how similar they remained, even across cultures that had no direct contact with one another. This suggests that the idea of dragons may have developed naturally, shaped by human attempts to understand powerful natural forces and the mysteries of the world. Over time, these early ideas grew more detailed, giving dragons a lasting place in mythology that continues to this day. In ancient China, dragons were seen very differently from how they would later appear in Western stories. Rather than being creatures of destruction, they were viewed as wise and powerful beings connected to water, rain, and the natural flow of life. These dragons were believed to bring balance and prosperity, often associated with good fortune and harmony. They appeared in art, architecture, and royal symbolism, representing strength, wisdom, and protection. Unlike the winged dragons of later European legends, Chinese dragons were often described as long and flowing, moving through the sky like currents of air or water. They were not something to be feared, but something to be respected and honored. Their presence was seen as a sign of balance in the natural world, and they were deeply connected to the idea of harmony between humans and nature. This perspective shows how the same idea can take on different meanings depending on culture. While dragons in some traditions were feared, in others they were seen as protectors. Despite these differences, both interpretations share a common theme: dragons as powerful beings that exist beyond ordinary life. This dual nature helped the idea of dragons spread and evolve across time. In many Western traditions, dragons were often described as creatures that lived in distant and isolated places, high mountains, deep caves, or far beyond the edges of known lands. These locations made them feel both real and unreachable, as though they existed just beyond where humans could easily go. This idea of distance played an important role in keeping the legend alive, as there were always places that remained unexplored. Stories often placed dragons as guardians of something valuable, whether it was treasure, knowledge, or sacred spaces. This role gave them a sense of purpose, making them more than just creatures. They became part of a larger story, something that stood between the known world and something hidden beyond it. This added depth to their presence, making them feel important within the world of the story. The idea of dragons as guardians also reflected human beliefs about the unknown. What lies beyond reach is often imagined as being protected, and dragons became a way to represent that boundary. They marked the line between what was understood and what remained a mystery, reinforcing their role as powerful and significant figures in mythology. As dragon stories continued to spread, they became closely tied to the idea of exploration and the unknown. For much of history, large parts of the world were not yet mapped or understood, and it was natural for people to imagine that powerful creatures might exist in those distant regions. Mountains that stretched endlessly, forests that seemed impenetrable, and oceans that reached beyond sight all became possible homes for dragons. Travelers would sometimes return with stories of unusual sights or unexplained sounds, and while these accounts were often uncertain, they helped keep the idea of dragons alive. A shadow moving across the sky, a distant roar echoing through a valley, or a shape glimpsed through fog could easily become part of a larger story. Over time, these details blended with imagination, creating a consistent image of creatures that were powerful, distant, and rarely seen. This connection to unexplored places gave dragons a sense of possibility. They were not just stories, but something that could exist somewhere beyond what was known. This idea allowed the legend to persist, even as the world slowly became more understood. Over time, the image of dragons became more detailed and consistent. People began to describe their scales, their wings, and the way they moved through the air or across the land. These details helped bring the idea of dragons closer to reality, allowing people to imagine them clearly even without ever seeing one. The more these descriptions were repeated, the more familiar they became. This familiarity played a major role in keeping the legend alive. When different stories describe something in similar ways, it creates a sense of recognition, as if the idea is based on something real. Even though dragons were never proven to exist, the clarity of their image made them feel believable. This is one of the reasons dragon mythology has lasted for so long. As stories continued to evolve, dragons became symbols of power, mystery, and the unknown. They were no longer just creatures, but representations of forces that humans could not fully understand. This shift allowed dragons to remain relevant, even as belief in their physical existence began to fade. As knowledge of the natural world expanded, dragons slowly shifted from something that might physically exist into something symbolic. They came to represent ideas rather than creatures, power, mystery, and the unknown. This change allowed dragons to continue existing in a different way, not as beings that needed to be proven, but as concepts that still held meaning. In this symbolic form, dragons became part of literature, art, and storytelling traditions. They appeared in tales that explored themes of strength, challenge, and discovery. Rather than being limited by reality, they could exist wherever imagination allowed, adapting to different cultures and time periods. This ability to evolve is one of the reasons dragons have remained such a strong part of human culture. While many other myths faded, dragons continued to adapt, maintaining their presence across generations. They became something timeless, connected to both the past and the present. Even today, dragons continue to appear in stories, films, and imagination, often carrying the same sense of wonder they held in ancient times. While their appearance may change depending on the story, their core meaning remains the same. They represent something beyond ordinary life, something powerful, mysterious, and deeply rooted in human thought. The continued presence of dragons shows how certain ideas can persist across time. Even as the world becomes more understood, the human desire to imagine something greater remains. Dragons fulfill that role, acting as a bridge between reality and imagination. This is why dragon stories continue to resonate. They are not just about creatures, but about the way people understand the world around them. They reflect curiosity, fear, respect, and the desire to explore what lies beyond the known. As you begin to rest and allow your thoughts to slow, imagine those distant landscapes where such creatures might belong. High mountains, quiet skies, and places where the world feels still and undisturbed. Whether real or imagined, dragons remain a part of human thought, representing something ancient and powerful. They remind us of a time when the world felt larger, when mystery played a greater role in how people understood their surroundings. And even now, that sense of wonder has not disappeared. It remains, quietly present, waiting to be remembered. Thank you for listening tonight, and may your rest be peaceful until we meet again here in Twilight Dance. As the idea of dragons continued to evolve, they became more than just figures in ancient stories. They turned into symbols that people could interpret in different ways, depending on their perspective. In some cases, dragons represented challenges that needed to be faced, something powerful that stood in the way of progress. In others, they were seen as protectors of balance, guardians that maintained order within the natural world. This flexibility is one of the reasons dragons have remained so relevant over time. Unlike many other mythical creatures that are tied to a single meaning, dragons can represent many different ideas at once. They can be seen as dangerous or wise, destructive or protective, distant or present. This ability to take on multiple roles allows them to adapt across cultures and generations, ensuring that they never fade completely from human imagination. Even in modern times, dragons continue to appear in new forms, shaped by the stories people choose to tell. While their appearance may change, their core meaning remains the same: something powerful, something ancient, and something that exists just beyond what can be fully understood.
Thank you all for listening. If you enjoyed this story, there are many more waiting for you here on Twilight Dance. Sleep well, and see you in the next one.